Welcome to the Mobile Hunter Podcast. We're your hosts, Rick Cates and Josh Luck.
Hey, everyone.
And tonight, we have a very special guest coming to the podcast. It's actually his first time ever being on here.
long time listener, first time caller.
Long time listener, first time caller. Just joking, guys. Our guest tonight is Christopher Leppert. Chris, how's it going?
What's up, brother?
Pretty good. Can't complain. So, we're bringing this to you this week. We actually had a whole series that we talked about that we were going to start this week, and all this amazing stuff. And don't worry, you guys will get to that. But we had to push it off a week because one of us finally killed a damn deer. One of us finally got something with horns on the ground.
Leave it to me to screw up the schedule as usual.
This is a good thing. It's not a screw. It's a good
I'll
thing.
take it. I'll take it.
This is a net positive for the group because the year of almost really got closed out in the year of yes we can, or the year of however the hell you want to call it.
This was the whole year really reminded me of our opening weekend in Kentucky a few years back, where it's just like, oh yeah, we had deer on the end of our nose and couldn't close, or whatever. And Josh had multiple encounters, and I couldn't buy a damn encounter, and had other stupid stuff happen. So it's good to kind of put us back in the positive a little bit. So if we were playing baseball, we'd be doing good, baby.
Yeah.
33.
Starting off 2025 the right way.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great way of looking at it. Is while it's the end of deer season for us northern folk, or gray states, as some of you would say where I live, but it started 2025 off on a real high note. So we wanted to bring you what actually happened with this deer, because it's a really good story. And from all of the ups and downs, if you go back and you listen to our podcast, I think it was probably 3 weeks ago, Josh and I did one about kind of the year of almost, like all these different things that had happened to all of us during the season. And it just kind of was one thing after another. And then we turned the chapter into 2025, start a fresh year, and we really hit it off with a bang. Well, Chris did. Chris
Still
shouldered the load for the group here, and we wanted to share this story with you because it's good. So, I guess from a base standpoint, Chris, everybody knows your background, so we don't need to go into that like we do with everybody.
Sure.
But give everybody an idea of how this kind of came to be and how it changed from, I guess.
Maybe we should start with when did you find out about this deer?
That's what I'm thinking.
Prior history with it, or did you find that deer this year?
So what Josh might not even know is we took a drive right before the Michigan show last year, and we filmed a bunch of really big deer one evening, and I ended up filming this deer and had video of him, and I wanted so bad to kill that deer. He was hands down the number one deer that I wanted to kill, and that's the year that I killed that big quadruple beam buck. But again, we didn't really know he was a thing because I didn't have him on camera, and I'd only seen him with bases 5 inches tall or whatever, and 10 inches around. But so I saw that deer and just fell in love. Had a backside kicker off his brow, little sticker off of his right side G2, and just was a gorgeous buck. But he changed his bedding. I don't know if it was pressure or food or whatever, but I couldn't get him on camera anymore, and he was in a different spot that I couldn't hunt on private. And So, gave up on him, found another deer, missed it. You all know the story.
Yep.
So I didn't.
That was summer of 23, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did not definitely see that deer on camera or in person this year. I'm sure I glassed him this year at some point, but it's just so difficult when you're, generally it's fairly low light and you're just trying to say, there's a big buck. You really don't get a lot of time or anything to really visually study them unless you're filming them. And even that can be very, very difficult. You got to catch them when they're out, on one of those like red moon days or something in broad daylight. So, waning wax and gibble dibbus. So, I hope Kaiser hears that. So I had prior history with the deer. I just absolutely fell in love with that animal, and then I couldn't hunt him. And so we go into this year, and I had to hunt private land. And, there's probably, just guessing, I probably have about between 3 and 5 acres that I have to hunt on that parcel. That's what I'd call huntable. And they're not bedding there. They're not bedding anywhere close to there. They're hundreds of yards away. So it's really just a passing through kind of thing. You can throw out corn. And Zach Kaiser, he's a huge corn guy. We've had debate after debate with the guy. Hey, it doesn't matter where, this isn't your like Disneyland property or whatever. I call him Snow White because he's like a Disney princess. He's like, oh, 150. Oh, 150. It's 2:30 p.m. Oh, 150. Like, where are you at? Because I never see that with corn anywhere. And everybody's all, the other side's like, corn is cheating. And I'm like, well, where can you point me out to the place where I can go cheat with the corn? Because I'd love that. So ran some bait on there, and I had bait up until about, I don't know, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago or something, and everything ran out. The cameras died. It was just dead. But I'd also I took some of those what are they called? God, I'm having a brain fart. Brush Creek Monsters makes them, the scrape vines.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and I hung them up during the rut, and a buck had happened to make a pretty good scrape, and I hung it over it, and every damn deer hit that scrape that would come through. If you got them on camera at the corn, if you got them on camera on a trail or whatever on some edge, they were gonna hit that scrape. So I thought for sure that we would have an opportunity in November at the very least, because there's does everywhere. I never had a mature deer daylight in person, on camera, nothing on that property. Now, I'm not saying that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't happen where I could see it with a camera or my eyes or binoculars. So it was really, really frustrating. And that deer showed up a few times. And the first time he showed up, immediately I recognized him. And I was like, oh my God, I have to hunt that deer. So, and there were a couple of other ones that I would have absolutely shot, and come to find out one that's significantly bigger.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize how big the deer was. But so yeah, had some history with the deer, long story, even longer. And then, he showed up a little bit at night this year, and really just was fixated on hunting that animal, and to sort of, be super upfront. I was just stuck on private after the time change. Like, there's no making it anywhere to public, and you got volleyball and dance and all this holiday stuff, and there just wasn't the time. And I missed my opportunity opening week, and it just wasn't going to happen really after that, but especially after the time change. So that was my situation.
Yeah, I made a comment to my wife this year, at some point this year, that this was, and I even told you, I was like, this is the least I've ever seen you hunt since I've known you.
Yeah, it's been far detracted from what you normally do.
Yeah.
It's tough. It's one of those things where I think part of it was arrogance for sure. Cause when I feel like I've got something dialed, I'm like all in, and you guys know me, I'm a lithium battery. I'm 0 or 100. There's no in between. So, I feel like I had my Ohio spot dialed. I feel like I had my Kentucky spot pretty damn dialed, and just couldn't make things happen. And I absolutely, for the most part, despise the rut because it's such a lottery ticket situation. I just don't feel confident in it with how I hunt. So, but yeah, with everything going on, it's really tough to explain to people, like even what we have going on when we're doing like the podcast and the channel and planning the shows. And like, I don't think many people understand what goes on behind the scenes. And then when you throw family and, holidays and time change, I wish the government would do away with this stupid ass time change, because that in and of itself would literally like open up a whole new world for all of us. And instead it's dark at 5:45 in November. And it's like, that's dumb as shit. So
Mhm. Maybe Rick's Savior will change that.
Yeah.
Maybe
Maybe Uncle DJT will have push it through.
Uncle DJ.
Uncle DJ. But so
Sorry, go ahead,
there's
Rick.
I think it goes without saying also, like you said, like you had decided to really, make a push at the end of the season. And
Yeah.
we had talked about this after kind of all of us had these crap shoots that happened, and we all had good encounters, we all had all these things, and it got to a point where if you're not familiar with what happened, well, I guess the entire southern half of the United States is familiar with what happened. It snowed quite a bit.
Mhm.
A whole lot, in fact. And we got up here between 18 and 20 inches of snow, which kind of put a damper on some things for some people being able to get out. And then finally the snow started to melt off a little bit. And within the past couple of weeks, we had started talking. Chris had kind of started saying, I've got to get back out. I know I can get back out if I just need some things to go right. And then all of a sudden, I think it was like a week out, or like it might even been 2 weeks out. You started looking at the wind. You're like, the wind on these days, like I think I can do this. And that's when you went in and started, finagling things around.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really interesting too. I'm going to kind of back it up a little bit, just because like so many things went wrong this year. So many times I'm just like, who hates me somewhere? Like, what in the hell is like up there with strings just shitting on me, right? I'm like, God, I was sick during the summer. I was sick in the fall, coughing and shit. And then, had the absolutely terrible, disgusting luck that I had in Kentucky and Ohio with having my opening weekends, basically ruined by idiots. And then on top of that, again, having things scheduled, and then I got sick some more, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose my mind. And then we get to basically right around where you were talking about, which is muzzleloader season.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a front for the ages coming in. And
Yeah, we did.
I couldn't give a shit less about a cold front in November. That doesn't, to me, I don't think it's what everybody else thinks it is. Now, I'm not here to really argue it, but I just don't get excited about it. But you give me a cold front, into January, well, now I'll have a conversation, because everything's hungry and they're running out of body fat. They've been run ragged and there's less food. So it makes more sense to me. So we get this huge cool down, and right with it comes all that snow.
Yep.
And everybody's freaking out. I'm not going hunting. I'm not going hunting. I'm not going hunting. And I'm like, Well,
How can you not go hunting during that
Well-
in muzzleloader?
well, I can answer that. There's a fuckload of snow on the ground. That's how. But I will say, I kept going back to one thing. At first, I've got 4-wheel drive. I don't have the best tires. I'm like, the majority of people are not going to be out on the roads. I got to be a defensive driver, and I'm just going to go slow. I'm not trying to go fast. I'm going to putt my way to my hunting spot. And at the end of the day, I don't think most people find success ever without taking a risk, really. It's rare that something just falls in your lap and you get lucky. It always seems to come because of effort and a lot of time, especially in deer hunting, a risk. Josh and myself, with the early season sort of bed situations, you're risking your entire summer and winter and like all that scouting is up in smoke in a second if you blow him out generally, So I thought, well, you can't be a hero if you don't go risk it for the biscuit, right? So I said I was going to go out there and do it, and then I put my truck in a ditch. So
I tend to forget about that part of it. So
Yeah.
so tell everybody a little bit about that end of the story, because
So-
that put a huge that was a huge issue over
Mhm.
the course
So-
of 4 days.
it was insane. So I was really down for a lot of the season this year. I was normally I'm pretty like, jovial or whatever. And I was just struggling mentally with everything that went on. And I had just started to like let that
Turn the corner.
creep back in. And I'll just shoot you straight. It was laziness. I didn't want to carry my clothes up this big ass hill, and it's a big hill. I was wearing, so Josh and I sort of came up with this new little how to keep warm system. And essentially it's a good base layer next to skin layer. And then you've got those, the Kuiu puffy pants and the Kuiu puffy jacket. And then you cover them in sweatpants and a hoodie. And it's literally as good as like any cold weather gear that I've tried, but it's super lightweight, packable. And because you cover everything in the sweatpants and the hoodie, it's very quiet. I didn't want to have to put all that shit on at the tree. I had already put it all on. So I was like, I'll just save the walk and the time, and I'll just drive up the hill. Well, I could have done that 2 months prior, but he just had his driveway paved. And this is a piece of private property that it like, I don't know if you guys, listening have ever driven down by the Ohio River, or you have a river near you that you drive where like you kind of laugh because you look at the people's driveways that are just out of the bottoms in those hills, and you're like, how do these people go up and down their driveway? I don't understand, especially when it snows outside. Well, they don't.
Yeah.
They don't leave, and then if they do, if they make it down, they park at the bottom. And this guy had always had a gravel driveway that was rutted up, gullied up, big chunks of rock and asphalt and everything in it. So I was always able to get a grip and go up and down it, even in the snow, especially with the amount we had, because it's not like we had that full amount. We had a few inches. It wasn't crazy, though. I think we'd had like 2 or 3 inches so far. So he just paved his driveway. And had I just parked at the bottom, I would have been fine. And I would have learned really fast how slick the driveway was, because I made it almost to the top. And then my ass end swung off the driveway. And I thought, well, I'll just put my my right side, passenger side tires on the edge of the, on the ground, not on the driveway, and I'll just back down the driveway in 4-wheel drive real slow, take it a few feet at a time, and we'll park at the bottom. Well, the ditch sucked me in and basically put me like partially in a honeysuckle thicket. I was 8 feet off the driveway or whatever at that point, and I couldn't go back towards the driveway at all. It just kept sucking me into the woods. Well, I got out, my buddy Matt was going to leave and come get me, but I had time. So I got my muzzle loader and went to go sit. I took like 3 steps on his driveway and fell flat on my face. And so I walked up there, saw 0 deer, came back. He slid down the driveway in his freaking 4-wheel drive, vehicle with a snorkel and mud tires. Like, it was just hell on earth. And I felt terrible because I put, one of my closest buddies in a damn terrible situation. He's got a family at home. So I'm like, man, maybe we should just kind of wrap this season up and before somebody dies or, whatever. Well, we're going through the year, and I just thought, man, something's got to go somebody's way. I gotta at least try. You can't just quit. And to be quite, not to get like cheesy or whatever, but my son has that mentality. He's 3, so I expect that out of him right now. But I always talk to him about how we don't ever quit. When we set out to do something, you're going to do it. You see it through. So I thought, man, I can't be a hypocrite. Well, not long after, I had this kind of little coming to Jesus meeting in my own mind or whatever. I'm out with my my little boy. So my daughter's birthday was not this last Friday, but the Friday before, on the 17th. And we had her family side of the party that night on Friday night. And the next day she wanted to have like a friend's birthday party and go ice skating. And Cade wanted to go ride go-karts. Colleen wanted to go with them and ice skate, but Erica didn't have enough room in the car. So I had to be transportation for Colleen. Well, me and Cade get done riding go-karts, and on our way over to pick Colleen up from the ice skating rink, I looked at my Tacticam, and there he is in daylight for the first time. And what's interesting is I was a little depressed because I didn't have that day off to hunt. And then I got to thinking, and I'm like, you would have never hunted this day in a million years. It was like raining, warm. It was the warmest day that we'd had in 3 or 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was warm. And I thought, what an odd thing that he daylights on the warmest day we've had like that. And so I start kind of asking myself why. I'm like, man, I wonder if he was bummed, because I know where this deer's bedding. I just can't hunt him there. And this is hundreds and hundreds of yards away. So I thought, I wonder if somebody bumped him. And turns out I think that actually might be, what happened. So kind of crazy.
So I want to clarify something here. Just for the listeners and just to get kind of narrow down some of the time frame and everyone said. So going back, so you had glassed that buck in the summer of 23, and
Mhm.
then by the time hunting season came on, he kind of disappeared on you. You knew about him, but he really wasn't in the picture. And then that's the year you killed your big one. And then going into this summer, you said you might have glassed him. You weren't sure, but there was another deer you were targeting.
Yeah.
And then that buck got killed. And then you go through the season, and then in muzzleloader, what you were just talking about, you were hunting a couple different bucks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So at that time in muzzleloader, had you had the buck you killed this year, did you have him pop back up on camera before then?
Yeah, I'd had him on camera a few times. I had him on camera throughout. I want to say November, obviously, and then in December as well. But he did a little disappearing act on camera for about 3 to 4 weeks or so. I didn't see hide nor hair of him on camera, but I did blast the deer. And that's when I saw him in person, because I think I'd had 3 different deer that I was like, man, I would shoot any of these.
Mm-hmm.
but in the back of my mind, because I have history with that deer, I wanted him. And when I saw him in person, I was like, oh wow, yeah, like you're it, dude. Like I'm thrilled to have you. And then, here we are. So
was November the first time he had popped back up on camera this year?
If it wasn't November, it was the very end of October.
Okay.
I would have to go back and look.
Yeah. So he kind of did a disappearing act, pop back up on camera. Nothing consistent that I remember you talking about at all.
No.
And then when you saw him in person, that wasn't that long ago, right?
No, it was in like mid-December.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you got this buck on camera infrequently that you have history with, glassed him in person in December, had all that happen to you in Muzz on a different property. And then this buck that you have history with shows back up randomly in daylight and you think he got bumped.
Yeah.
So pick up from there, kind of what was the thought process of like, okay, now he's in person. What kind of were you thinking? Were you thinking at that time like, okay, now I think he's targetable because he's coming in daylight, even though it was just the one time?
So I immediately told my wife, like, hey, we have, this week and next. And I tried my best. Obviously, you don't have a lot of time. So I told her, I was like, any day with even okay conditions, I'm going hunting. So I love you. Do not make plans for me or I will throw a fit from hell. Please. Please don't do it to me. So I remember I went out and I felt like it was the first I filmed it and everything. Like I went in and I was like kind of freaking out a little bit because I was like, I'm going to kill this deer. We had like a really good cold front come right back through. It got super cold and I thought, this is the night I'm going to be just off wind and this dude's toast. And the wind was everywhere that night. It was the same night you went.
Yeah. I was going to say it was the same night I went and had that encounter.
Yeah. And I was like super depressed because I didn't see any of the good bucks at all. And the wind was just everywhere. And I was beside myself when I got down. Like, well, you probably got winded tonight and you're probably screwed. And then literally my camera died. So and it's not like, you can just get like, I don't want to go in and out of there all the time. So I'm like, you're just going to have to trust that he's coming in or he's going to come in or whatever. You cannot go in and out of there or you're going to screw everything up. So, take your chances hunting and otherwise stay the hell out. You don't need to educate him or trigger him or anything like that. So I hunted, I think, one other time and it was even like I didn't see nearly as many deer or anything, which it was slightly warmer than that other day. And then after that, I thought, man, I don't know. And I kind of went back to the drawing board. And again, what am I really going to do here? Like you can only just go. And that's one of the tougher parts about the private land is that I can't just go look for the deer or anything and go, get him. Like I could have killed this deer the first week of season if I can just go hunt, but I can't. I have to wait for him to come to me. And I despise the hell out of that. But I got a thought in my head, because I had mentioned to Pierce, I was like, man, I just wonder if he got bumped, and it just wouldn't leave me alone. Well, Saturday was another day that was a warm up instead of, it was conditions that did not look great to hunt. And I thought, I'm going to go out that day, when the conditions aren't good and maybe there's something going on with the thermals that's happening because of the warm up and the snow melt and all this different stuff. I don't know, but I'm going to go and see. And wouldn't you know, I'm watching all these different deer. There's deer just pretty much coming from everywhere at this point. And that buck, along with two other bucks, I look to my left and they're coming through the woods, and I'm like, oh my God, I think I see some racks, and they're probably 125, 150 away. And I thought, dude, they're going to come right down this old logging road. Like, you know, this is where I have him on camera coming in and all that. This is freaking perfect. And they don't look spooked, which is you know, because if they are being bumped, you know how leery and everything are they going to be. So they're coming, and then all of a sudden they look like they got nervous, and I'm like, no, no. And they go across the guy that owns the property. He's got like a good sized driveway, and they go across his property into an old like meadow. And then all of a sudden I see two deer walk right down the driveway, and they're like, I think they're fawns. I'm like, and they cut in right towards me, and I'm like, oh, you little douchebags. Like, if one of you blows at me, I literally like whispered. I was like, if you blow at me, I'm gonna dump this quiver. Like, I would dump the mag, and you do not screw this up for me. And so they make it past me, and I watch the bucks walk down the edge of the meadow just on the other side of the driveway past me, and then they come up on the driveway and are walking back the way they came, and I'm like, what in the hell are you doing? And I thought, when I looked at the best deer, I was like, man, I think that's that big 3-year-old that I actually made a post about on the page, and just asking people's opinion if he was mature or not. And so I got to thinking, man, you know, he's a pretty nice deer. And I looked at the deer behind him, and I'm like, man, that looks like a pretty good 3-year-old, but, you know, a little smaller. So I bring up, and I think I'm like filming, trying to get footage of the bigger deer. So I'm holding my phone up, and then you can see me pull my rangefinder up. And I forget exactly what I said, but it's along the lines of, oh shit, there's that backside kicker. That's him. Slung everything into my backpack. And I had my Insta360 on, so we were good there. And I just grabbed my bow, and like right as I'm going to grab my bow, that buck breaks right. He's even with me, and he turns right at me, and he's coming down a trail right at me head on. I'm like, God. So I get the bow off the bow hanger, and he's going to come to my left, and then he just goes to the right. I'm like, you son of a bitch. So I had to get my bow over my bridge and around the tree. I'm like, all right, prepare for, you know, maybe shoulder injury here, because we're basically, you know, for those of you that don't know, in a saddle, when you're performing a weak side shot, which I've got all of my other stuff, you know, my backpack's on that side. There's a buckeye tree kind of in my way, so I'm having to finagle in between the limbs and everything. And so essentially, you know, if I'm at 6 o'clock on the tree, I turn my feet, like my heels, to the tree, and then I'm leaning out away, putting all my weight on my saddle, on my bridge, and I'm leaning directly away from the tree, arching my back, holding myself up with my core, and then drawing. And so that deer gets behind a couple of really big oaks. And right when he does that, I'm like, well, hopefully he doesn't bust me, because he's 25 yards at that point. And so I go to draw, and then right at probably the last, we'll say I'm like 3/5 of the way done drawing, and the last 2/5 are with him in the wide open at like 20 yards. And I'm just like, how did I not spook you? Well, I didn't spook him, but I spooked the fawn that had just walked by me.
Oh, jeez.
And of course, he doesn't blow, but he freaks out and runs right past the buck, and the buck stops at 17 yards behind like this big downed limb. And I'm just like, oh, you just came like 600 yards and I needed a half a step, dude. Come on. So I'm holding full draw, and Josh and I had just got those elite eras this year, and they're extremely aggressive. There's not a lot of let off going on. Like, they claim they've got X amount of let off. I don't know that number's really up to par with what actual let off is, because if you have, they probably have that, but it's just, there's no like big deep valley. If you think about something else, it's gone. So you got to really apply some good like back tension in your shoulders and everything. And so I'm sitting there, full draw, hold myself up with my core. And I'm like, well, he's got to move somewhere at some point, and he's just statued out. Well, then I start hearing the arrow on the rest. I'm like, oh, damn it. Like, we can't have one of these, where you kind of lose it and bring it back. Anything. You can't let down. This is your season here. So what are we going to do? I waited and waited, and finally I was like, okay, here's the plan. We're going to put as much tension on our tether as we can, and we're just going to try to get an inch or two of view, because again, I can't see any of this thing's vitals. I can see the bottom of his belly, maybe the bottom 2 inches of his belly and his legs. That's it. And then of course the top of his back, all the stuff you can't shoot. So I'm like, just put all your might and all your weight on the saddle and try to just like, jostle around a little bit and just see if you can find something. And I got down and in my head, and I had done this once before and it somehow worked out, but the deer's 17 yards. I'm like 15-ish, maybe 16 feet tops high. My thought was, take your 20 pin and put it on the bottom of that downed limb. You should be able to, I have low pro veins, so you should be able to sneak that arrow just underneath that limb, and it should come in a little hot at the deer because it's 17 yards with a decent angle. Nothing crazy, but an angle, and you're using your 20 pin. So I should be able to get somewhere at least in that heart, maybe top of the heart. While I reviewing the footage, we're pretty confident that I hit a limb, a little, I would call it like in between a limb and a twig. It's 3/8 of an inch in diameter or something, it's pretty small.
I mean, you visibly see this, like,
Yeah.
You have to be looking for it in the video.
Yeah.
Like, and you just see like that right when it hits.
It shakes real violently, and we're like, well, crap.
Yeah, you don't even notice it at first unless you kind of slow it down. You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Like, I think I might have been one of the first ones
You
that
were.
noticed it.
Yep.
Because I was reviewing the footage after you sent it to us, and I was like, wait, you hear the bow go off, and then it looks like that twig move, and I watched like multiple times, and I was like, I think I even asked you, I was like, hey, did you hit this branch? It looks like you might have hit it.
Right. So I watched the deer jump straight up in the air, which is, to me, generally, that's like, oh, heart.
Well, and hold on, like, also, like, reviewing the footage, when you listen to that hit,
Yes.
like, it sounds like that, like dead deer. Like,
Yeah,
like
Great rib.
yeah, just like you, like, it sounds like you just popped him.
And to clarify, you cannot see the arrow in the
Correct.
footage, and I did not get to see the arrow because of that limb. So this deer jumps straight up in the air and then runs 15 yards and stops. And then he walks a couple of feet and he's just kind of looking around, wondering what happened. And I'm like, man, I hope I didn't like graze the bottom of this deer's belly or something. And then to me, in person. You can't see it as well in the footage. And I could have just been jacked out of my mind and maybe kind of like tried to go down a hill and slid or something. I don't know. But it looked to me like he was starting to go down, and you can even hear me. It was a little embarrassing, honestly. I lost my shit for a second. So, 'cause, I mean, you're talking about a whole season on the line, and then he comes in that far and stops behind a limb, and I'm like, oh damn. You know, it's never like, hey Chris, did you shoot that deer? Yeah, it was perfectly broadside, 20 yards. I watched him. It's like, well, I was held captive on an island by this witch, and then I got off the island, and it was 10 years instead of 10 days, and like all this stuff just happens. So he looks like he's going to go down, and then he just walks away. He turns and walks up the little, walks through the ditch, up the little knoll, across the driveway, and then I lose sight of him. I shot him at right around like 6 o'clock and p.m. Eastern Standard Time for those that care, and you couldn't see really well. So once he went over into that meadow behind all the like autumn olive and everything, I lost sight. So I waited until it got dark and everything, and I'm just like trying to calm myself down a little bit, just so I don't go to get out of the tree and fall, make some stupid mistake. Because I was amped. So I get down, and like a responsible person, I slung all my shit on the ground and went over there and looked for the arrow. Yeah, you shoot a doe or something or whatever, and you're like packing up and organized. Everything just went to the ground, and I went right over to the arrow with my flashlight. I inspected the arrow. The arrow barely had anything on it. Looked a little, maybe muscly or something. Was fairly clean, but you could tell that I'd hit the deer. So I walked the way that he walked, and after about 10 or 15 yards, I found some spots of blood. And then I just happened to look up, and there's literally, it looks like you just had a gallon jug of blood on each side in each hand, and held them about a foot apart and just turned them up and walked slow. I mean, I've seen some pretty good blood trails, the good lung blood ones where there's just blood everywhere from those severs and others. But man, this was good. So I was like, oh shit, I'll bet I walk up on this deer like in 50 yards. I'll bet he's right over here where I lost sight of him. I followed that kind of blood trail for 100 yards, roughly. And then, I'm thinking the whole time at this point, I'm like, okay, well, where could I have hit a deer that bleeds like this? It's leaky. It's not a lung. It's clearly not, that high lung shot where they're just, and there's splatter everywhere out of their mouth and both sides. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, we have some kind of vein, artery, whatever. I'm probably in a situation where I'm going to need to, hopefully walk up on this deer in the next 100 or 2 yards, but probably push him. And so I walked across the field and then up into those woods, and then tracked him and lost him. I had blood the whole time, but I didn't have permission to go to the next property. We'll put it that way. I never lost him. I could have jogged the blood trail the entire time, and this is, I don't know, 600 yards at this point. So of course, I come home, I called Josh, I called Zach, I'm talking to these people, about the hit, and, texting all you guys in the thread, and just trying to get everybody's insight. And my boy Rickles Pickles is like, oh, you're going to find him. You're like the most positive human being. And the whole time I'm just like, man, I'm glad you're positive. So I'm not one that is like, oh, let's go knock on some doors and, deal with people. People love hunters. I just don't want any part of it, which is part of why I got into the public thing. and I was going to have to go ask permission and hope that somebody's home and
Mhm.
not there too early, or whatever. Do they work third shift and they're asleep at 9 a.m. because now they hate me? So I'm like praying about it pretty hard and just uber nervous. And then on the way down that morning, I was like, hey, you're going to have to treat this kind of like archery, like shoot your shot. Don't go in there nervous and crying and praying for them to like walk in there, smile, look them in the eye, tell them good morning, ask them how they are, and then just start a conversation. Just be yourself, basically. Don't walk in there nervous. And dude, the first guy was like, he invited me in, and when he invited me in the door, I'm like, well, we're sitting pretty here. You invite me in your house, I feel real good about that. And he's an older guy, and I don't know. I never saw anybody else. I don't know if he's got anybody else, but I think he was pretty happy to have somebody to talk to. So I sat there for almost an hour and talked to him just about everything under the sun. And then he gave me permission to go retrieve my deer. Well, wouldn't you know? I picked that blood up immediately, and things are just going my way now. And that deer was on his property for about 30 yards. And it went on somebody else. And I'm like, oh my God. So I go, I can't get access to their place. And so I'm like, we'll just walk up the edge of the property line, and hopefully that deer doubled back, circled around or whatever. He just wanted to get to a certain elevation and walk a bench or whatever, and maybe you'll catch him cutting back over the property line. Well, the person's dog like races up the hill and is, barking at me and everything. And I'm like, crap, man, I'm not trying to like, let everyone in the world know that I'm here and, all that. And I don't want to disturb anybody. It's not early, but it's fairly early. Some people might not be like me and have kids that let them sleep. So I thought, well, this isn't going so well. Well, I hear the guy come out and yell for his dog. I'm like, well, the dog's not leaving. He doesn't care about anything the gentleman's saying. He just wants to basically bark at me. So I'm like, all right, I'm talking to the dog. I'm like, come on. Took him back down there. I was like, sir, I apologize. I didn't mean to, cause trouble with your dog or anything and have him run away from you. Here he is, yada, yada, yada. And I introduced myself and just said, hey, I hunt on such and such over this way. I shot a deer. It came this way. I got permission on this property, and it looks like it's ran on your property. Would it be okay if I retrieved it? And he's talking, and you can tell like he's not, like a hunter or anything. And he tells me I can go look for my deer, and is like the nicest person ever. And I'm just like, just overjoyed with just that. You'd have thought I found my deer, because again, like I think I'm going to get some no's that morning. And I go up there, I'm following blood, and then I lose it. And I made a loop, and then kind of like a dog does, where you lose a track and then try to circle around and just maybe quit bleeding for 10 yards or 20 yards or, whatever. And one thing that I do want to point out that I hope helps somebody, and I know it will, for guys that don't get to deal with the snow a lot, like guys in the South and even here in Southern Ohio, I kept finding these big spots of blood, but they were under the snow. And it almost like it was pretty red, but it wasn't super far off from the way it looks like when a deer or a dog pees in the snow, that amber color
Mhm.
that it dissipated. Well, Josh had mentioned that maybe it kind of seeped through the snow. And I felt like he was right, but we don't know, right? But I verified. I mean, it's blood, but I'm just like, what the hell's going on with this? Well, it was just like a snow cone, basically, the Hawaiian ice or whatever. If you watch the way liquid travels down through it,
Mm-hmm.
That's why they keep pouring that syrup on there to make it more vibrant. Well, when I had walked back down the hill, because I'd looked, I'll go ahead and kind of finish that out. I had searched for nearly 6 hours, hadn't eaten or drank anything but coffee. And I thought, okay, we haven't found any more blood. We need to go get some rest and do the thing that we did not want to do, which is call a drone. We were going to have to do a dog or a drone. I felt like a drone was less invasive. I don't want to piss anybody off and show up with some person none of us know and a dog that's going to go run wherever. So I thought a drone would be a quick and easy way with all the snow on the ground and how cold it is. We'll find a deer. So on my way back down, close to my truck where all that blood was, I looked, and sure as shit, it looked the same way. It had seeped down into the snow, and essentially what had happened is the sun had kind of hit the snow a little bit, and that stuff just trickled down. And so I videoed it and everything and sent it to Josh and everything. And I was like, dude, this is really, really priceless information to have for 35 years from now when we get another snow like this. So I had exchanged numbers with both landowners. And the first landowner called me when I was on my way home, actually, to check and see if I found my deer. And which was cool, that he was like a little invested. That kind of made me feel good. And I go pick up, some trash fast food and go home, pound some food and drink and just lay down and thought, we're not meeting this dude till like 8 o'clock. It's probably going to be a long night. Let's take us a little nap. Well, like right when I just doze off, I feel my phone vibrating. And what's crazy is here lately, I've been putting my phone's just been ape shit this fall and winter. And so I put my phone on like the sleep mode so nobody can disturb me. No notifications, nothing, just so I can like turn it off for a little bit. And I didn't this time. I just fell asleep. And I feel my phone vibrating, and it's the second landowner. I'm like, ah, crap, man. I hope I didn't do anything I wasn't supposed to, or so, I'm like, what's going wrong? Kind of looking over my shoulder, like, where's the lightning? And it's like, hey, Chris, what are you doing? I'm like, well, to be honest with you, I was sleeping. I'm going to come back down later and look, but just needed to rest a little bit and eat and everything. And he's like, no worries, man. We found your deer. And I lost it. I said, what? Like, we found your deer. We got it. We went out looking for shed antlers with the kids, and he's laying right there, not far from our backyard. And I'm like, oh my God, you have to be kidding. And sure enough, so this is kind of really, to me, the coolest part. In that, I guess it would be called a silver lining.
Mm-hmm.
I pull up, and this dude with his whole family, wife, kids, everything, they're waiting on me. Keep in mind, they have no idea who I am at all with hunt. They don't follow hunting. They don't hunt. So they have no connection to that side of things. They don't know me from Adam. And they're out there waiting. This is like a big deal to them. And they've got this UTV. And they're like, all right, kids in the back, Chris, hop in the front. So I get in there. We drove like 80 yards, 100 yards maybe. And we get on the edge of this meadow that I had walked through on the opposite side. There's like a finger of trees that runs out into the meadow about 75 yards. I was on the left. The deer died on the right. So we pull up, and I'm just marveling and like honestly trying not to cry like a little girl. I can't believe that this has all come together like this. And I'm, admiring the animal and everything. And he's like, well, we'll pick him up. We'll put him in the UTV, and then we'll just, go load him in your truck. And I'm just like laughing inside, like, it never happens. Like, this is not how it goes. Normally I have to cut these damn things up and pack them out or finagle them onto a kayak or whatever. And He backed right up to my truck. I drug it out of the bed into my truck bed, and they congratulated me and everything, and I was on my way. So what a way to end the deer season. And I, for those that might have saw the post I made, it's really, if you're a believer, then you can probably identify with this a little better. But just one of those things where like you're just like going through it, and you're going through it, and you're going through it, and it's kind of like with a negative mindset. And then what's interesting is when you have that deer, when you find your success or whatever, and you look back, you're like, man, thank God I got my truck stuck. I was hunting smaller deer. Thank God I couldn't go hunt muzzleloader season, which BT dubs, my truck was stuck in that ditch for, I don't know, like a week and a half.
Week and a half.
A while.
Because I couldn't even drive us to ATA. Josh drove, and then literally the night I got home from ATA was when I went with my neighbor and got it, which, made for kind of a lot longer of a night than I really hoped, but I needed my truck the next day to take my kids to school. I had no other choice. It was get it out or go rent a vehicle. So I didn't want to go pay, however much that costs, to rent it for a day or week or whatever. So was very blessed to be able to get it right out. There was no damage to the truck or anything. So, but yeah, looked back on everything and thought, man, it's a good thing I had all that crazy shit happen to me, because now here we are. It's kind of one of those things that you're really proud of too. So I didn't quit, didn't give up, which is, something I take a little pride in. And, you take to the internet and post a little bit about it or whatever and show some pics, and people are jacked for you. And it's kind of like, I don't know who else kind of gets themselves jacked up on, old sports highlights. But I just pictured like Big Poppy jacking one over the green monster or whatever, and hearing Joe Buck say, "We'll see you later tonight." And they're all waiting for him at home plate. It's just like, it was freaking epic, man. Like, how cool.
I'm sitting here thinking of like, it's like the inverse of what happens to teams when they play the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Literally that. Literally that.
It's instead of the pass interference call against the Bengals, it's like the pass interference call would be on the Chiefs, and they miss the Super Bowl or something like that.
So I was waiting for somebody to throw the flag on me, like literally with the whole like landowner situation. I felt like I was in a Chiefs game. Like, that's the best way you could put it. Here's your deer. Just kidding. Here's 3 flags and
a ticket. Get the hell off my property.
This is my deer now. And what's very interesting that I want to point out too, how kind of, this like big God thing. If that dog doesn't come up and bark at me, well, there's a fairly good chance I don't meet those people, and they don't know who shot that deer, how long it's been there. Maybe they pay somebody to haul it off, or, have a cop or game warden come grab it or bury it, or, you never know. Maybe their dog gets up there and gets a hold of it, and then, they're like, I hate these deer hunters. They're wounding deer, and, all that. So just so many things that could have went wrong. And I was telling you guys, like, I was waiting to look up and see like the 10-yard, giant patch of blood in the snow with fur everywhere from coyotes shredding it, or I could have come out on so many different negative ends of that, which again, when you follow, like for example, a Jake Bush who persevered through like the craziest shit ever to kill a mega, that still things lead, it's just life, right? Like, you're just pushing through. But I could have been on the bad end of the stick, no problem with this. So really, really super grateful that God bless me, and grateful for you guys, because I mean, you nothing but supportive, and I'm like down and out, and you're like, you're gonna find him, and I'm like, okay. It's just, it's a tough thing, but hopefully one of these days I'm gonna shoot a deer and just watch it drop and be like, hey, he fell down. We just got to walk right over here. He's dead. I promise.
One of the wild things, I mean, all the evidence to me suggested that that deer was dead. It was a matter of finding it.
Yeah.
And one of the wild things is when you found it.
Oh, yeah.
it wasn't even that stiff. He hadn't
Yeah.
been dead that long.
rigor mortis hadn't set in. And I know, and Zach brought this up, and I already knew. But in case you don't know, rigor mortis sets in and then kind of leaves. So
Yep.
like you'll notice when you let a deer hang for a couple of days, it'll get stiff, and then it won't be stiff. But that deer was not dead more than a couple of hours tops. So I don't know if I maybe bumped him out of his bed up there, and then that's why I don't know if he lost all his blood. I mean, for the most part, there really wasn't, how when you like gut him and everything, and there's like a bunch of blood internally.
Yeah.
There wasn't. Now, the only real blood that I ran into is once I got him skinned and everything all the way down to the base of the neck head area. I cut all the flesh around there to run the chainsaw through the spine. And when I cut the flesh, it was like what the butcher does to the cattle, or what, like the blood just came pouring out of the neck. But other than that, like there was no blood really internally. And I think we should probably tell people.
Yeah,
also,
I was going to ask that.
and we'll put some pics for those that listen, but maybe aren't on the page or something on the Mobile Hunter group and Facebook. But essentially, I hit this deer what I would call a decent bit low and a little back. I would probably say it was about 4 inches, maybe 5 inches behind the back of the leg, the crease, if you will. So decent ways back. If I'm a few inches higher, though, that deer's piped.
Mm-hmm.
But what's interesting is because I was low, I was down too far, basically, and essentially I shot his right side, and I hit the bottom of the back lobe of his right lung, and then I nicked the inside of the back lobe of his left lung, and then I went through the diaphragm and the rumen. I never did check the liver again. I didn't see any trauma to the liver. Zach's pretty convinced that I hit it somewhere, but again, I literally hit both of the lungs, not perfectly, but I went through the very bottom, like the whole broadhead was inside the lung. And then the other one, it basically, because of the angle, I would say a blade caught the inside of that lobe and then went through the diaphragm and the rumen, which, if you don't know, that's the grass bag. There was grass and everything in the cavity forward of the diaphragm. So very interesting. We've talked about this on the podcast with Zach, a little bit with Brian Johnson. Not all lung shots are created equal.
Mm-hmm.
And
No, they're not.
Another thing that's, I don't know this and just assume it all the time, but as I'm looking at it, I'm like, man, I was right above the heart. And Zach's like, hey, those lungs aren't like under pressure or whatever. He's like, they're a quarter of the size of what they are when that deer is like pressurized, essentially. So that makes a lot more sense. But yeah, so really crazy. We had a 0.8 mile track total. He made it 0.8 miles, which is crazy. I was talking to my father-in-law. I was like, could you imagine if I just shot you anywhere? Could you imagine me shooting you like in the arm and then you going 0.8 miles? Like, hell no. Like, that's crazy. So they're tough though. So we got him. It's a beautiful deer. Excited to get him up on the wall this year, bring him to the shows, all that. And it's my first January buck, which is
Ever?
special. Real buck, not like
Robot. Okay, I was going to say.
that I shot when I was 20 or something,
Not a shed buck like I killed.
Yeah. Rick's first bow kill. I'll never forget that.
It was actually,
Look at that big doe.
it was 9 years ago today.
Oh, really?
It was 9 years ago today.
Saw those big 2 Coke can size holes in its head, and I'm like, oh my God. He just shot a giant with no antlers.
Did you haven't put a full tape on this deer yet, have you?
I have not, no. I taped his tines today. because I just wanted to know, I wanted to know what his big G2 was.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, you might as well try to measure the rest. And I got 51.5 inches in tines. And so we were figuring up like with a 15-inch spread, 22-inch beams, and what 32 inches of mass, I think he would come out like right at 140 or something like that. I think is what we came up with.
Yeah.
So
I'm still saying 148 and an eighth.
I still think it's around that 142 mark. We'll see when we get a full tape on him.
oh yeah,
So he's essentially he's a mainframe 8.
yeah,
He's got a split brow on the left side, so
Yep.
he's technically a 9, but
Yep.
and he's got a kicker off of his right side too.
yeah. Just a gorgeous deer, man, and
Yep.
and so cool. And again, we're to the sucky part. I've spent 2 years looking at videos and showing videos of that deer to people, and I'll never see him again, ever. So that's a thing.
Well, I mean, you'll see him
You'll
on
see
your
him.
wall.
Oh, yeah, like,
you
you-
won't see him on hoof
Not the
anymore.
same. Like I'll reflect and it'll be cool. It'll be
You'll
pop,
eat him. You'll see him in your dinner plate.
but it's one of those things. Like you start looking at pictures of a deer and videos of a deer hundreds of times and showing them to people and all that and talking with your buddies about a specific deer, and then he's just gone. Like there's an empty feeling of like remorse, and it's a weird feeling, man. I don't mean to get like deep and depressing on you guys, but it's a crazy feeling. You really don't expect it.
Yeah, well, the way that I look at it, there's a song lyric by a guy named Frank Turner that says the journeys bring joys that outweigh the pain, and that's really typical of deer hunting when you start looking at some of these bigger deer that get killed, and just these situations in general. I really look at the whole season for all three of us in kind of that lens, is that Chris, you have this whole journey through the season of where all this shit happens, and then the pain kind of there at the end, and then like you said, like you're never going to see this deer on the hoof again. Like there's not going to be any more pictures. There's not going to be anything like that. But the journey was cool to it, and there's still, while it's a bittersweet ending, it's still great. I talked about this multiple times with myself. Like this season has been infinitely like I didn't kill a buck. I passed 2 deer, and I feel like it was one of the best seasons I've had in a real long time. And Josh, like we've talked about this as well. Like you learned a lot more about different things and how you want to set up in certain places and how to do all this different stuff as well. And I look at it, not from trying to be the eternal optimist, but at the same time, I feel that those are important points to realize as we go into hunting, this upcoming season.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
agree.
my season wasn't. It was a success without it being, a quote unquote success, because I had encounters with 4 different bucks for a total of 6, 7. Yeah, between those 4, I had 7 encounters. Good Lord. What kind now that I think of it, it's like, it's a stab in the gut. But
Dude, it's
from a pure encounter standpoint, my best season. I just different stuff happened and wasn't able to close.
Isn't it
2025
interesting?
will be our year.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting though? Like like turkey hunting, for example. Like there's little, and I'm not aiming this at you or your season, so I don't want it to come off that way. But like you have those encounters some years, and maybe you're not as aggressive, or something doesn't go your way, or whatever, and then you just make like this little decision, or something stupid happens, and you squeeze it out. It's just so weird how just the tiniest little thing happening or the tiniest little decision is the difference between you killing a deer or not. Like it's crazy. And it's almost, to me, it's similar to turkey hunting, because I believe that, turkey hunting, you can be a really good caller or have good property or whatever, but when he comes in, you got a few seconds to make a decision, and you're going to have to live with that decision pretty much the rest of your life, whether it's good or bad. And they'll make you feel just as dumb as a big buck ever would. So kind of crazy.
Yeah, they will. Yeah, they will. I'm on to turkey season already.
Hey,
I know our listeners might not want to hear that, but I am fully on to turkey season.
I got one more day, and that's tomorrow with Chris
Yeah,
for
yeah.
deer, and then I'm on the turkeys.
we're gonna I will accept turkey talk, but I would like to focus on tomorrow's hunt, which would be Wednesday in the last week of Ohio. And then so me and Josh are gonna go out and have a doe slaughter. And then my father-in-law and I are gonna go out this weekend, and I'm gonna try to get him a deer. And really, I mean, I don't like Josh's odds, but what if a buck came in tomorrow that was like one of those good ones? Really, there's basically one left that I know has antlers, the Big Ten. That other big one with the long beams, he might not have either antler now, but he only had one antler, as of a couple days ago. So, but I mean, you literally never know. Like, I would laugh my ass off if that big deer, and I wouldn't tell you not to shoot it. Like, I would love to see that deer next year, but I know I've had that happen before with a buddy where I was like, hey, here's the deer I want to kill. You can shoot any other deer. And the deer I wanted to kill walked in front of him basically, and not me. And he didn't kill it. And man, it'd be nice to look at that deer on his wall at least, because I never saw it again. So, I mean, if that Big Ten comes in, he's getting
Pop him.
It's getting.
We'll see what happens. In my head, I was like, no bucks, only does.
No, you can't kill one of my babies. You can't, you can't kill my up and coming. I don't know if he's 2 or 3, but I know that's a 140-inch 8-pointer that's going to turn into something special. I would assume he's got beams and tines for days. So, but one of those big deer comes in, he's getting shot on film. So
Good deal.
So yeah, that's the story of Chris's crazy shit season that somehow I pulled out of my ass. A deer.
I'm proud of you for doing it, man. I'm
Appreciate you.
proud of you for sticking with it.
Thank
And I think also this goes back to the conversation we had on the psyche of a hunter thing, where humbling yourself with regards to some stuff that you're not used to doing really paid off.
Yeah, that was, man. Yeah, agree. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate it. Well,
Gentlemen, anything else for this evening?
I think we're good.
all right.
Deal. All right. Well, this has been the Mobile Hunter Podcast. We've been your hosts, Rick Cates and Josh Luck. And tonight we were joined by our very special guest, Christopher Leopard. So, guys, have a great evening. We'll talk at you later. Bye.
See you.